The Mongolian plateau sits 1,500 meters up and stretches across 1,000,000 square kilometers of grassland with almost nothing to break the view. No forests, no valleys worth mentioning. When winter comes, Siberian high-pressure systems push wind south and east across all that open ground at 20 to 40 kilometers per hour, day after day, sometimes for weeks. The wind doesn't break, it speeds up. Wind chill isn't about how things feel, it's physics. Your body keeps a thin layer of warmed air against your skin. Wind strips that away and replaces it with cold air, so your body has to heat the boundary again and again. The faster the wind, the faster you lose heat. At -40 degrees with steady wind, exposed skin experiences something closer to -55. At that point, tissue damage starts in under 5 minutes. Livestock die the same way. Mongol herders watched animal mortality across winters for generations, and the pattern holds. Deaths spike not with raw temperature, but with wind exposure. A sheep standing in open ground during a windstorm loses body heat faster than it can replace it by eating, even if it grazed well that day. The same sheep behind a hillside survives. There's a name for this in Mongolian: white zood. It's a winter disaster driven not by temperature alone, but by wind and snow together. Snow covers the pasture, and wind keeps the animals from reaching what's underneath. But the wind also strips their body heat in real time, forcing them to burn through fat reserves while they're already starving. Animals don't freeze to death in a white dzud. They die of exposure and energy depletion combined, and wind is the mechanism. Humans face the same equation. Your resting metabolic rate in extreme cold can double or triple as your body burns fuel just to stay warm. Add wind, and the rate climbs higher. Medieval travelers who crossed the steppe wrote that the wind was worse than the temperature. William of Rubruck, a Franciscan friar who passed through Mongol territory in the 1250s, wrote that the wind cuts through heavy robes and that no amount of layered clothing fully stopped it. He wasn't being poetic. He was describing convective heat loss. So the survival problem isn't how do you stay warm at -40, it's how do you stop wind from stealing your heat faster than you can produce it. That reframing changes everything. When Mongol families sited their winter camps on the leeward side of hills, it wasn't convenience. It was the first line of defense. When Gurs face south, it's not symbolism. South-facing doors minimize exposure to the prevailing northern wind. When dung gets stacked into low walls around the camp perimeter, it's not about penning animals in. It's about cutting wind speed at ground level where the livestock stand. The steppe offers no natural windbreaks. There are no forests to hide behind, no canyons to drop into. The landscape is the problem, which means every solution has to be built or chosen on purpose. The Mongol winter survival system is a set of answers to one question, asked over and over: how do we stop the wind? That question determines where the family camps, what their shelter is made of, what they burn, and which animals survive. Get the answer wrong, and nothing else matters. Get it right, and the temperature, brutal as it is, becomes something you can work with. Before the felt goes up, before the stove's assembled, before the animals are gathered and the winter stores unpacked, the most important decision is already made: where to put the camp. Get this wrong, and everything after is a losing fight. Get it right, and survival becomes possible. The winter campsite, Övelyo in Mongolian, isn't scouted in October and chosen on instinct. It's inherited knowledge, often used by the same family for generations. They return to the same patch of ground year after year because that ground has already proved itself. The location's been tested against the worst winters the steppe can deliver, and it's still there. What makes a site viable isn't random. It's a checklist refined over centuries, and every item is an answer to wind, cold, or logistics. First, leeward positioning. The camp goes on the southern or eastern slope of a hill, ridge, or low-rise where the land itself blocks the northern and western Siberian winds. Even a 10 or 20-meter rise in terrain cuts wind at ground level. The difference between sheltered and exposed ground isn't symbolic. It's the difference between a herd that survives and a herd that dies. Second, solar exposure. South-facing slopes get maximum sunlight during the short winter days, and that sunlight does two things. It gives psychological warmth to the family, not trivial when you're living through months of darkness and cold. More importantly, it melts or sublimates the snow cover on the pasture. Snow that clears naturally means livestock can graze without exhausting themselves, pawing through deep drifts to reach grass. Animals that spend all day digging for food burn more calories than they recover, and they enter a slow starvation spiral. A south-facing slope where sun clears the snow turns that equation survivable. Third, water access. Rivers, springs, or streams that don't freeze completely, or where ice can be broken daily. Melting snow for water is possible, but it's expensive in calories. It takes real fuel to melt enough snow for a family and a herd. Accessible liquid water saves argol reserves that would otherwise be burned for melting. In a system where every resource is finite and nothing is wasted, that savings matters. Fourth, pasture proximity. Winter pasture has to be within manageable distance of the camp. Livestock can't travel far in deep cold without burning fatal amounts of energy. The camp is positioned so animals can graze and return to shelter in the same day. If the pasture's too far, the animals exhaust themselves commuting. If it's overgrazed or poor quality, they don't get enough nutrition to maintain body heat. The timing of the move to winter camp is its own calculated decision. Families migrate from autumn pastures to Ouvelieu in October or November before the worst cold and snow arrive. Move too early, and you exhaust the winter pasture before winter's over, leaving nothing for the hardest months. Move too late, and you risk being caught in a blizzard during migration, which is when livestock losses spike. Animals moving in a storm, already cold, already stressed, die faster than animals at rest in shelter. This is logistical chess. Every piece, when to move, where to move, which animals to take, how much argol's been stockpiled, feeds into the next. The winter camp is the anchor point around which everything else rotates. What happens if the site fails? If the snow is deeper than expected? If the wind is worse than usual? If a winter storm hits harder than the land can block, the family may be forced to move midwinter. This is a last resort. Moving livestock in deep winter means driving them through cold and wind when they're already nutritionally stressed. Many won't make it. The new site may not be better. Midwinter migration is the survival system admitting failure. The Ouvelieu isn't chosen in a vacuum. It's embedded in a broader ecological knowledge passed down through generations. Families know which microvalleys hold less snow, where ice forms thinnest on water sources, which pastures retain the most nutrition in winter grasses. This knowledge isn't written down. It's lived, tested, and passed along as survival information. The camp itself, once sited, becomes a small tactical landscape. The GRs are positioned to minimize wind exposure. The livestock are kept close enough to shelter quickly, but far enough that their movement doesn't destroy the immediate pasture. Dung walls, blocks of dried argol stacked into low windbreaks, are built around the camp perimeter or around the areas where animals cluster overnight. These walls don't enclose the animals. They reduce wind speed at animal height, cutting the wind chill that would otherwise strip body heat. One material doing two jobs: fuel for the family, architecture for the herd. Site selection is the moment where agency matters most. Mongol survival wasn't about enduring hardship, it was about avoiding it. The family doesn't fight winter head-on. They position themselves so winter's worst blows miss them. The camp goes where wind is weakest, where sun is strongest, where water is accessible and pasture is sufficient. Everything downstream, felt layers, argil fires, meat storage, animal care, depends on this foundation. Winter survival is decided before winter arrives. And it's decided right here, on a sheltered slope facing south, where the wind breaks and the snow clears and the grass is still reachable underneath. The GR looks simple, a round tent with a domed roof sitting on flat ground. It doesn't scream survival technology, but look closer at what it's made from and how it works, and you're seeing a thermal system built from compressed wool and fueled by dried dung, functioning in a place with no wood and no stone. The walls are felt, not woven fabric. Felt is wool fibers that have been wetted, beaten, and pressed together until they lock into a dense mat. No threads, just thousands of fibers tangled and compressed into a solid layer. Felt works because of air, trapped air specifically. Air conducts heat poorly, which makes it a good insulator, but only if it stays still. Wind strips heat away fast. Felt's chaotic tangle of fibers creates thousands of tiny pockets where air can't move. The air stays trapped. The heat stays in. In summer, one layer of felt covers the GER. In winter, families pile on more. 2 layers, 3, sometimes 4. The total thickness can hit 3 to 5 centimeters of compressed wool. It's not fiberglass or foam, but it's enough to keep a tent livable at -40. The wooden frame underneath is a collapsible lattice, light enough to pack on animals when the family moves. But the frame isn't doing the insulating. The felt is. The wood just holds it up. Winter means more than extra thickness. Families drape a canvas cover over the felt to keep it dry. Wet felt stops insulating. Water conducts heat way better than air, so soaked wool becomes a problem. The canvas sheds snow and keeps the felt dry. Some families add an inner felt lining too, creating an air gap between layers. That gap, just a few centimeters of still air, adds another buffer. The door is low, covered with a felt flap, not for looks, but to keep heat in and wind out. Every time someone goes through, cold air rushes in, so the door stays small and gets closed fast. The roof has a circular opening at the center, the tonneau, where the poles meet. Smoke has to get out, but the opening also lets heat escape. In extreme cold, a felt cover can partially close it, but only as much as the smoke allows. Balancing ventilation and heat retention is part of the daily routine. The shape helps. A circle has less surface area for the volume inside. Less wall means less heat loss. The low ceiling, under 2 meters at the walls, rising toward the center, keeps warm air close to the people, instead of letting it pool uselessly high up. Inside, people sleep on felt mats. Wool blankets and furs cover them. The insulation isn't just the walls, it's layered everywhere. The felt comes from the same animals the family herds. Sheep and goats get shorn in summer. The wool gets processed into felt in autumn. It's renewable, repairable, and light enough to pack when the family migrates. Worn sections get patched with new felt. Nothing's thrown away, but felt only slows heat loss. It doesn't make heat. For that, you need fire, and fire needs fuel. On the steppe, there are no trees, no forest, no branches, just grass, and grass doesn't burn hot or long enough to heat a tent through winter. So Mongol families burned something else. Argil, dried livestock dung. Sounds absurd, right? Like a last resort. But argil isn't a compromise. It's the right fuel for the place. Dung is partially digested plant matter, still rich in cellulose and fats. Dried thoroughly in sun and wind, which happens naturally over summer and autumn, it turns into a hard, nearly odorless fuel that burns hot. Hot enough to bring a GR's interior to 15 or 20 degrees when it's -40 outside. Hot enough to cook on. And it burns clean once lit, with steady heat and minimal smoke. Collection starts in spring and goes through autumn. Kids and women gather it from pastures, shape it into cakes or bricks, stack it to dry. A family needs several tons to last the winter. It's not casual work. It's a months-long logistical operation. The stove, called a zu, sits at the center of the GR, right under the tuno. It's metal, cylindrical, with a chimney pipe running up through the roof opening. Argol gets fed into it constantly, day and night. Keeping the fire going is someone's job at all times, because if it dies, the temperature drops within an hour. The stove is also where you cook. Pots of tea, meat, milk foods sit on top. One fire heats the space and makes the food. The same argol that fuels the stove gets used outside. Dried dung cakes are stacked into low walls, 1 to 1.5 meters high, around camp or where livestock gather overnight. These walls, called kasha, work as windbreaks. They don't enclose the animals. They cut the wind speed at ground level, which reduces wind chill. Livestock exposed to direct wind lose body heat faster than they can replace it, even if they're eating enough. A windbreak doesn't stop the cold, but it lowers the energy cost of staying warm. Horses and cattle benefit most, though sheep and goats, which bunch together naturally, still gain protection. One material, two survival functions. Argol heats the people and shelters the animals. On a landscape with no timber and no stone, the fuel and the structure are the same. This isn't primitive. It's appropriate, meaning the solution fits the problem perfectly. Wood would be great, but there's no wood here. Coal needs infrastructure a mobile family can't carry. Argol renews every year, sits wherever livestock graze, travels light, and works. Modern people see dung and think backwards. A Mongol herder sees dung and thinks fuel, building material, proof the animals are healthy. Felt traps the heat. Argol makes it. Together they turn a wool tent into a place you can survive at some of the coldest inhabited temperatures on Earth. Neither works without the other. The system only functions because both pieces fit together, refined over centuries and maintained year-round. Survival at -40 isn't about being tough. It's about wool that holds still air and dung that burns hot. It's engineering, and it works. The slaughter happens in late autumn, October or early November, right when the temperature drops below freezing and stays there. It's not one big event. It's a process, spread over days, and the choices are deliberate. Old animals get taken, weak ones, injured ones that won't make it through winter, extra males that aren't needed for breeding. Each family slaughters several animals, sheep, goats, sometimes cattle or horses. Enough meat to last months. The carcasses get butchered and hung outside. Within hours, they're frozen solid. They stay that way until spring because the steppe itself stays frozen. No fuel burned. No storage technology needed. The landscape is the refrigerator, and the meat keeps without salting, smoking, or drying. Families cut portions from the frozen carcasses as they need them through winter. The cold that could kill them is the same cold that preserves their food. Freezing halts bacterial growth. The steppe's extreme cold and low humidity are nearly perfect preservation conditions. There are no freeze-thaw cycles to break down the meat. It stays frozen until they need it. Then it's cooked right away. The environment isn't just something to endure, it's something to use. Winter's cold becomes a tool. Meat alone doesn't cover everything. Alongside the frozen carcasses, families rely on arul, dried milk curds made in summer and early autumn when milk production peaks. Milk from cows, yaks, goats, sheep, mares, or camels is soured or curdled, separated, shaped into small pieces, and sun-dried until it's rock-hard. Arul is concentrated protein, fat, and calcium. It keeps for months or years without refrigeration. Families eat it hard and chewy and tangy, or they soften it in tea or broth. It provides critical nutrition during the winter hunger gap, when fresh milk production drops. Most livestock don't lactate in winter. There's no spring grass to drive milk production, and the animals are focused on staying alive, not reproducing. Dairy historically provided up to half or more of caloric intake during warm months. Arul, along with other preserved dairy products like dried yogurt, butter, and cheese, fills the gap when winter shuts down fresh production. It's essential. But the centerpiece of the winter diet is fat, not tradition. Physiology. Fat is calorically dense, 9 kilocalories per gram, compared to 4 for protein or carbohydrates. In extreme cold, the body's caloric needs spike just to maintain core temperature. Resting metabolic rate can double or triple. Fat provides sustained energy without constant eating, and it supports thermogenesis, the body's production of heat. Mutton, especially from fat-tailed sheep breeds, is prized for its fat content. Tail fat is valued above lean meat. Boiled or roasted meat is served with large chunks of fat left on. Milk tea, sute tsai, is prepared with milk, butter, and salt, consumed multiple times daily. It's hot, fatty, hydrating, and calorically dense. At -40 degrees Celsius, fat is fuel. The body burns it to stay warm from the inside. A lean diet in extreme cold is a path to hypothermia. The modern viewer might recoil at eating large amounts of animal fat, but that response comes from a place where heating is external and constant. On the steppe, your body is the furnace, and fat is what you burn. Plant foods are almost entirely absent in winter. No vegetables, no fruit, no grains unless traded from settled regions. And even then, flour is historically uncommon in nomadic settings. The frozen steppe produces nothing edible for humans, except through animals. The diet is meat, fat, and preserved dairy, because those are the only foods the landscape provides. Animal body condition mirrors human needs. Just as humans need fat to stay warm, livestock survival depends on fat reserves built up in summer and autumn. A well-fattened animal has energy to burn to maintain body heat through winter. A thin animal will die. Herders monitor body condition constantly because the animal's fat isn't just wealth, it's survival margin. The system loops back on itself. Summer's labor produces winter's food. Milk collected and processed in June becomes arul consumed in January. Animals fattened on summer pasture are slaughtered in October and eaten in February. The steppe's cold, which threatens everything, preserves the meat that keeps the family alive. Winter survival isn't won in winter. It's won in the yatatiyam months before, when the work is invisible and the stakes feel distant. Whether a family has enough meat, enough arul, enough fat, all of that gets decided when the air is warm and the cold is still hypothetical. The frozen carcasses hanging outside the GR aren't emergency rations. They're the plan. The arul stacked inside isn't a backup, it's the core. And the fat in every meal isn't indulgence. It's the metabolic fuel that keeps a body functional at temperatures where exposed skin freezes in minutes. The cold is the test, but the outcome is decided before the test begins. When a lamb is born in late February, the air outside is still 30 below. The lamb comes out wet, no body mass, no fat, can't regulate its own temperature. On frozen ground, it's dead in hours, so it comes inside. Someone carries the newborn into the jar, sets it near the stove, dries it off with cloth or just their hands. It stays there until it's strong enough to survive outside, usually 1 to 3 days. In a bad spring, you'll have multiple newborns in one jar at the same time. Lambs and goat kids clustered by the fire, bleeding, stumbling around the same space where the family sleeps and eats. Someone has to watch them constantly. If a mother rejects her lamb, someone hand-feeds it or bottles it with milk from another animal. If it's too weak to stand, someone holds it upright until it can. The line between human space and animal space disappears. Each lost lamb is a direct economic loss. These animals are future wealth, future milk, future meat. Whether the family survives next winter depends partly on how many of this year's lambs make it through their first frozen nights. So they come inside, and the GR becomes a nursery. This is where you see what survival actually looks like. Not toughness or stoicism, attention, care, interdependence. The cold doesn't care how tough you are. It responds to preparation and action. Families don't camp alone. The image most people have, one gyr on an empty plain, a single family against the void, is romantic, but wrong. Winter camps are clusters. A cot ale is a group of 2 to 10 related or allied families camping close together. Not a village, the families stay mobile, but a cooperative unit. Sometimes the gyrs are right next to each other. Sometimes they're within shouting distance, always close enough to share labor and risk. The work gets divided. Herding, collecting argil, breaking ice on water sources, watching for wolves, which are a real threat in winter when prey is scarce, helping with difficult births, repairing shelters after wind or snow damage. Risk gets pooled. If one family's herd takes unexpected losses, if their food stores run low, neighboring families help. A family that loses animals can borrow breeding stock. A family short on argil can share another's fire until they restock. Isolation is dangerous. Cooperation keeps you alive. The structure usually follows kinship. Brothers, cousins, in-laws, but non-kin allies join too. Leadership is informal but respected. Typically an elder with deep ecological knowledge who's survived more winters than anyone else. This isn't charity. It's mutual dependence. Every family benefits from the others being there. Shared labor means less individual burden. Shared risk means no single family carries the full weight of disaster. And shared space means psychological survival. Months of darkness, cold, and confinement are easier when you're not alone. Medieval travelers wrote about this. Giovanni da Pian del Carpine and William of Rubruck, passing through Mongol territory in the 13th century. Both described camps as clusters of households. 20th century anthropological studies confirm that cot ale remains the standard winter social structure, even as everything else has shifted around it. The lone nomad is a myth. Winter on the steppe is one together, or it isn't one at all. This is why Ulaanbaatar still sits in the middle of the steppe, not despite winter, but because generations learned to turn cold into a tool. Winter here was never survived by toughness. It was survived by systems. Felt that traps air, dung that burns hot, camps placed where wind breaks, and families who refuse to face it alone. Every choice traced back to a single threat. Not the temperature itself, but the wind that stripped heat from skin and herd alike, turning survivable cold into a fatal one within minutes. The same force behind the white disease that could kill a healthy herd through exposure alone. So families studied the land before pitching a tent, choosing leeward slopes that blocked the Siberian gusts, south-facing ground that cleared its own snow and gave the herd reachable grass, water that saved argil reserves otherwise burned for melting, and pasture close enough to reach and return from in a single day. Move too early and the pasture ran out before spring. Move too late and a blizzard could catch the family mid-journey. The site itself was inherited knowledge, tested against the worst winters the land could deliver and passed down rather than guessed at. The gyre itself became an engineered answer to that same wind. Layers of compressed wool, sometimes 4 thick, trapped still air against the cold, while a canvas cover kept the felt dry, since wet wool stopped insulating entirely. Its round shape and low ceiling held warm air close rather than letting it escape through the tonneau above. Where no tree ever grew, argol fuel filled the gap, dried through a season of collection, and burned hot enough to bring a frozen interior to a livable warmth. The same dried dung doubled as fuel and windbreak, stacked into kasha walls that cut wind speed at animal height, one material carrying 2 jobs at once. Outside, frozen carcasses hung as a refrigerator built entirely by the very cold that threatened to kill, needing no salt, no smoke, and no fuel to stay preserved until spring. Arul, dried through the short window of summer abundance and rendered animal fat, carried a family through the hunger months. Because on the steppe, the body itself is the furnace, and fat, calorie for calorie, is what keeps it burning through months where the land offers nothing green to eat. Livestock followed the same equation. An animal fattened well in autumn had a survival margin. A thin one did not. Newborn lambs came inside by the stove because a single February night could decide a family's wealth for the year ahead. And because the line between human space and animal space simply had to disappear when the alternative was losing next year's herd. And no family stood alone. Caught ale clusters of related or allied households shared labor, risk, and warmth because isolation on an open plain with no natural shelter was its own kind of exposure. One family's bad year became every family's shared burden, carried together rather than faced alone. The gyre, the herd, the stockpiled argol, the frozen meat hanging outside, each one a calculated answer to a landscape that kills anything unprepared and rewards only what was planned for months in advance. None of it was improvised. The felt was sheared and pressed in autumn. The argol was gathered from spring through autumn. The site was chosen, tested, and returned to across generations. Survival wasn't endured. It was built season by season, decision by decision, long before the first snow ever fell. And it is why, centuries later, a city still stands where nothing but grass and wind once ruled the horizon.